We begin with the story of Summerwind. It all starts on the shores of West Bay Lake in northern Wisconsin, a peaceful region where forests plunge into the water, where the silence is deep, almost dense. There, at the bend of a dirt road, once stood a large Victorian house. Elegant, isolated, slightly weathered by time. It was called Summerwind. Officially, it was named Lamont Mansion. But for those who had crossed its threshold, it bore other names. Names not spoken aloud. Names you feel. It was in the early 1970s that Summerwind truly entered the troubled history of North America's haunted houses. Yet it existed long before. Built around 1916, it was originally named Lamont Mansion after its first owner, a businessman with a murky past who lived there only briefly. From the start, something was off. But as often happens, the first warnings were blamed on fatigue, the climate, or solitude. Wisconsin, especially its forested areas, isn't known for mental clarity. Long winters, thick silence, dark lakes, dense forests. It's a land ripe for erasure. And it's in this setting that the first signs appeared. According to local archives and indirect testimonies, the Lamonts lived in the house for only 2 years. 2 years marked by increasingly frequent domestic conflicts, a chronic sense of unease, and the gradual collapse of the family patriarch's mental health. Some accounts, difficult to verify, tell of a chilling scene. Mr. Lamont allegedly fired several shots from his revolver down the central hallway of the house, claiming he was shooting at the shadows watching him. However, no physical trace of these bullets was ever found. In 1948, after the disappearance of Robert Patterson Lamont, the property passed to his heirs. None wanted to keep it. It's said a heavy silence hung over the inheritance discussions, as if the mere idea of discussing the manor made everyone uncomfortable. They quickly sold the house to a Mr. Kiefer, a discreet, taciturn man whose only mistake was perhaps inheriting it. Kiefer never lived there. He maintained it vaguely. A coat of paint here, a roof check there. But the shutters often remained closed, the rooms empty. The house seemed frozen, suspended in a state of waiting. It was said his wife, Lillian, refused to even set foot on the property. Not out of caprice, no, out of fear. A silent, tenacious fear. She never went beyond the wrought iron gate. When Kiefer went there briefly to sign a paper or oversee work, she stayed in the car, hands clenched on her purse, eyes fixed on the facade, like one stares at a wild animal. A neighbor recounted finding her in tears after a simple walk that had taken them a bit too close to the edge of the estate. I can't. I just can't. There's something inside. When Kiefer died suddenly in 1965, Lillian immediately tried to sell the house, but the building seemed to have a will of its own. Every time a buyer appeared, the deal fell through. It wasn't the money, the location, or even the condition of the property, fairly good for its age. No, it was what visitors felt upon entering. Some reported a vague, unnameable discomfort. Others would stop mid-tour, as if suffocated by the atmosphere, demanding to leave immediately. One real estate agent allegedly fainted in the West Wing hallway for no apparent reason. After months of futile attempts, Lillian gave up. She never set foot near Summerwind again, and the house remained empty, silent, as if waiting for someone. That person arrived a few years later. In the early 1970s, Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw, an ordinary couple, decided to move in with their children. Ginger was a teacher, gentle, rational. Arnold, an appliance salesman, dreamed of tranquility, fishing by the lake, long summer evenings, in a house steeped in history. They bought Summerwind cheaply, almost a bargain. They didn't yet know you don't settle unscathed into a house that doesn't want you. Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw, young, enthusiastic parents were charmed by the building. At first glance, everything seemed perfect. A peaceful setting, an old yet elegant house, space, silence. But from the very first days, Ginger felt an oppressive atmosphere. When the Hinshaws moved into Summerwind, everything seemed normal. Or almost. There was that lingering odor, like dampness mixed with something else. A rancid, ancient impression, impossible to name. There were also the cold, constant drafts, even with the windows closed, and the doors that slammed. Always the same ones, always at the same hour. But Ginger, the composed schoolteacher, put it down to the structure. An old 19th century building, it shifts, it creaks, it breathes, she told her children. She said it, but she didn't believe it. Arnold, however, remained enthusiastic. He spent his evenings repairing, painting, renovating, dreaming of a tranquil future by the lake. There was an almost feverish energy in his movements, as if he wanted, through the force of DIY, to tame the house. But very quickly, something changed. Arnold threw himself into renovations, vainly trying to apply constructive logic. But his behavior changed. He bought a Hammond organ and played it every night, for long periods, obsessively. He claimed the spirits ordered him to play. His discordant melodies echoed throughout the house, terrifying his family. Within 6 months, he lost his job, suffered a mental collapse, and was hospitalized. Ginger herself nearly gave in to the temptation to end her life. Furthermore, after their arrival, the couple discovered in a cupboard a piece of furniture concealing a space where their gaze met, a desiccated corpse. Their daughter Mary screamed. The body disappeared the next day. No one reported this to the police. Several sources remained skeptical. The house itself evolved. Windows opened by themselves. Construction tools disappeared and reappeared in other rooms. The hired workers often refused to return, citing rooms that changed dimensions overnight. Contracts abandoned, plans useless, measurements incoherent. The arrival of Raymond Bober, Ginger's father, marked the turning point. He took over the house, this time with the aim of turning it into an inn or a tourist restaurant. He wrote The Carver Effect under the pseudonym Wolfgang von Bober. In it, he described visions of the explorer Jonathan Carver, who died in 1780, whose spirit was supposedly trapped in the place, searching for a Native American document sealed in the foundations. Bober claimed the house itself had the ability to move, to change configuration, and that the spirit frequently appeared to him. One day, his sister Carl entered the house alone and heard a voice pronounce her name, followed by 2 detonations. When he went downstairs, he smelled gunpowder and spotted 2 old bullet impacts in the basement door, the same ones fired by Lamont decades earlier. He fled, convinced the events were repeating. Raymond tried to continue the work. He would measure a room, then measure it again the next day. It had changed size. On the plans, the space intended for 150 covers soon became too small for 80. He then remembered the workers' testimonies claiming they had lost tools, unreadable plans, and a feeling of being watched. In 1980, Life magazine included Summerwind among the 9 most terrifying houses in the United States. The story became institutionalized. The manor became an attraction for ghost hunters and the curious. Demolition attempts began in 1985, deemed dangerous and overrun by vandals. The climax came in June 1988, when lightning struck the building during a violent storm. The manor burned entirely, without the surrounding trees being touched, and despite lightning rods still being installed. Today, only a few moss-covered chimneys, foundations, and concrete stairs remain. Yet, some legends persist. People still speak of a woman in white seen among the ruins, floating orbs, even organ music that echoes on autumn evenings. After the devastating fire of June 1988, the Summerwind Mansion was reduced to smoldering ruins. Firefighters determined the fire was caused by lightning striking repeatedly, with no trace of criminal origin. Strangely, the fire remained confined to the building. The surrounding trees were untouched, despite the violent storm. But while the structure vanished, the phenomena themselves continued, in another form. Former visitors and ghost hunters reported several strange phenomena, namely, strange apparitions. Teenage girls canoeing along the lake claimed to have seen a woman in white floating near the shore, beckoning passers-by before suddenly disappearing into the forest. When they returned several days later, the figure refused to approach them and vanished again. Paranormal recordings. Several groups of amateur investigators, PIM, Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee, conducted nighttime sessions around the ruins. Despite ambient noise, insects, distant car sounds, local wildlife, some claimed to capture EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, faint voices or whispers barely audible through their microphones. The site is difficult to document scientifically, but the clips circulate within specialized circles. Appearing, then disappearing layouts. These observers explain that even at night, the ruins seem alive. Certain passages between walls seem to have closed up, while others appear, as if the space was reconfiguring itself. It's a memory architecture, recreating itself in the perception of visitors. Olfactory and auditory residues. Witnesses recounted smelling gunpowder in certain spots on the grounds, like an echo of Lamont's confrontation with the specter in the 1930s. Some claim to hear a faint echo of a distant organ when the mist is thick and the dead leaves are still. Since the fire, the property has been closed to the public and belongs to a private owner who forbids access. Yet, the ruins continue to fascinate the curious. Some local residents claim that the real problem wasn't the fire, but the house's impatience, that the building always resisted human presence to the point of the absurdity of fire. For them, Summerwind is no longer a physical place, it's a corrosive memory. And so, Summerwind may be nothing more than a pile of stones eroded by time. But it continues to inhabit those who knew it, and perhaps even those who have just heard about it. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to leave a comment, share your impressions, or recount your own strange experiences. We'll then move on to the story of the village of Onghats. There are places that seem designed to test our perception of reality. Places whose very existence defies logic, geography, memory. Ong's Hat is one such place, a village that may have existed, or perhaps not. A rumor that became a legend, then a closed case. And as always, between the lines of these accounts, something persists, something insists. What you are about to hear is a story of erasure, a story of an opening, and perhaps of a passage to elsewhere. No one truly knows where Ong's Hat is. Some will tell you it's in New Jersey, on the edge of the Pine Barrens forest. Others will claim it's just a name, a nickname given to an intersection of dirt roads in the 18th century. What's certain is that at one time, on certain maps, a dot bore this strange name, Ong's Hat. But quickly, that dot vanished, struck out, erased, or ignored. And it's precisely this ambiguity that fuels the mystery. The first known mention of Ong's Hat dates to the late 18th century. At that time, stories tell of a certain Jacob Ong, an eccentric merchant who opened a stagecoach stop and inn there. It was a discreet, isolated halt at the edge of an impenetrable forest. Nothing extraordinary, just a forgotten hamlet, like hundreds of others. Except this village would know a very different fate. For from the beginning, Ong's hat held an anomaly. According to local rumor, Jacob Ong supposedly had a habit of throwing his hat into the air whenever annoyed. A wide-brimmed black hat with embroidered edges. One day, irritated by a drunk customer, he threw his hat so violently that it disappeared, caught in the top of a pine tree. The village was allegedly baptized thus, Ong's hat. A mundane anecdote, almost comical. But legends often begin this way, with an absurd detail. Over the decades, Ong's hat was mentioned by a few travelers, notably hunters and itinerant preachers. But none described the same place. Some spoke of a haunted marsh, others of an abandoned campsite. There was always this impression of inconsistency. Ong's hat seemed to change shape, density, location. Then, nothing. Complete silence for nearly a century. Until one day in the 1970s, a strange pamphlet began circulating clandestinely in academic and alternative circles. A yellowed booklet titled Ong's Hat, Gateway to the Dimensions. The document claimed to reveal a secret group of scientists, quantum physicists, and New Age mystics who had taken refuge in the Pine Barrens region, precisely where Ong's hat once stood. They had reportedly gathered around a common goal, to open a breach between dimensions. The core of the story? A machine, an experimental technology developed by two researchers who fled traditional institutions. Dr. Wally Fard, a Princeton-trained physicist, and Dr. Frank N. Alveston, a specialist in chaotic systems. These two men, according to the pamphlet, had created a device nicknamed the Egg, an ovoid capsule lined with sensory circuits and frequency modulators, designed to isolate the mind from the physical body and allow a dimensional leap. Not a mental projection, not a psychedelic experience. Number, an actual passage from one plane of reality to another, a conscious transfer into a parallel universe. And according to testimonies reported in the document, it had worked. Legend tells that a small group of volunteers, called the Monks of Chaos, had been chosen for these experiments. Women and men who abandoned their civilian identities to become pioneers of an alternate world. They described, upon their return, a place similar to ours, but empty, uninhabited, quiet, a world without war, without technology, without noise, an intact world, and at the center of this world, exactly where Ong's hat stood, a black structure, silent, pulsating, a building that seemed not built, but grown, like an outgrowth of the ground itself. Of course, no one could verify these claims. No photos, no direct witnesses, nothing but vague accounts, illegible diagrams, missing coordinates. Skeptics cried hoax, an elaborate prank, a science fiction tale disguised as a spiritual manifesto. But others didn't laugh and began to search. In the 1990s, several urban explorers went to the Pine Barrens to locate the ruins of this alleged research center. Some reported finding strange foundations covered in moss. Others claimed to have seen moving lights in the woods. One woman stated she spent 2 days circling a clearing where her compass spun endlessly, unable to find north. Another, more disturbed, recounted stumbling upon an abandoned campsite where everything seemed frozen for decades. Intact dishes, unmade beds, rusty but whole generators. And at the center, a half-buried metal sphere. He took a photo, but the shot came out black. By this point, the mystery had folded in on itself. Ong's hat had become an echo chamber, a place that, whenever sought, changed its appearance. Some saw it as a collaborative fiction launched by artists. Others, a genuine program concealed by authorities. An ex-military source stated anonymously that ONG's hat had been a test site for non-local consciousness experiments before the program was absorbed by DARPA. He added this strange phrase, "It's not a place, it's a frequency." So what was ONG's hat? A simple New Jersey village forgotten by time? A secret base for forbidden experiments? Or a passage to an alternate reality? The truth, as always, remains suspended. But what is certain is that for over 50 years, people continue to search for this village. And some never return. The name of Dr. Wally Fard resurfaced for the first time in a 1969 academic document tied to an obscure publication on fractal structure theory applied to consciousness. A physicist, Princeton graduate, whose path suddenly becomes blurry. No photos, no trace after 1971, as if the man had vanished from the surface of the world. But according to testimonies collected in the pamphlet, ONG's hat, Gateway to the Dimensions, it was he who allegedly founded, along with Frank N. Alveston and 2 other anonymous figures, the Institute for Chaos Studies, an independent, self-managed entity with no legal existence, set up deep within the Pine Barrens, in the abandoned buildings of a former sanatorium. This place, lost amid pines and sand, was supposedly transformed into a secret lab, far from any government oversight, a break from academic science. There, they reportedly conducted experiments blending quantum physics, deep meditation, and rituals drawn from esoteric Sufi traditions. And at the center of all these experiments, the egg, an ovoid capsule, 2 meters long, lined on the inside with materials that absorbed all external stimuli. Not a transport machine, but a medium of resonance, a consciousness amplifier. The subject would enter in a state of extreme meditation under the influence of binaural rhythms, and modified waves would generate complete detachment from the physical self. Then, something would happen. The first jump supposedly occurred in 1975. A volunteer, nicknamed Cielo, stayed in the capsule for 18 hours. Upon waking, she spoke an unknown language. Her eyes no longer responded to light. For 3 days, she refused any food, whispering only, "The light does not come from here." Then she vanished. Literally. One night, the other Institute members found her missing from her room. Not a trace. The door was locked from the inside, but on the bed, where her body should have been, was a perfectly round imprint, as if something had disintegrated or transported. The official report listed it as a runaway case, but there were no calls, no sightings, no follow-up. That was the moment when the term portal was used for the first time. The team, now reduced to 4 members, continued their research. And that's when anomalies began to multiply. Phenomena of extreme synchronicity, shared thoughts, identical dreams, physical sensations experienced at a distance. One researcher once claimed to feel a burn on his arm, at the exact moment his colleague, 50 meters away, stumbled upon a scorching hot metal plate buried in the sand. Animals seemed to avoid the area. Stranger still, measurement instruments became erratic, watches spinning backward, thermometers showing sub-zero readings in 30 degrees Celsius heat, compasses stuck, magnetometers overloaded. At the entrance to the site, an old wooden sign was found one morning covered in carved spiral symbols. None of the team members remembered making them, but all of them claimed to have seen them in a dream. Then came what they called the shift. One winter night in January 1978, during a raging storm over the Pine Barrens, a group member, a certain Ezra, a former mathematician turned Sufi mystic, entered the egg without permission. He activated the system alone, in a trance state. The storm, at that exact moment, struck a nearby tree. Lightning cut the power, and the egg opened. Not mechanically, but physically. According to testimonies from the others, a tear appeared in the very surface of the capsule, as if the metal had been sucked inward. A white light, without heat, filled the room. Total silence. Then, nothing. When they returned to the room, the egg was empty. Ezra never returned. But over the next few hours, an acoustic phenomenon began. The walls themselves vibrated, as if the structure was singing. Harmonics inaudible to the human ear, but causing certain objects to become unstable. A mirror exploded without contact. Water in the pitchers trembled, and at times, the floor seemed to breathe. From that point on, testimonies become murky. Some say the remaining members left the site. Others claim they stayed, but that the site became invisible. Not physically, but informationally. No data, no signals, no way to locate it, even with the original coordinates. As if the place had been dereferenced from reality. And yet, some people claim to have been there. In 1992, a group of hikers claimed to have found a clearing out of time. Identical trees, perfectly spaced, moss of an unreal green, and at the center, a metallic object, half buried. A smooth, cold dome with no visible opening. They approached, but one of them panicked, saying the landscape was subtly changing with every blink, as if angles, shadows, and distances fluctuated. They took pictures, but upon return, the film rolls were blank, not overexposed, just white. Today, some independent researchers believe the ONG's Hat portal was never closed, but that it does not lead to a place. It leads to a state, a mental space where reality becomes subjective, malleable, shaped by the observer's consciousness. And in that case, the more you believe in it, the more real it becomes. The more you seek it, the more you fuel it. The portal would not be a passage to an alternate world, but a creation of our collective will. And that is what makes ONG's Hat so dangerous. Because if reality is a collective agreement, then every dissonance is a crack. And within that crack, something else can seep in. Another world, or a twisted reflection of our own. In the final lines, found in a clandestine reprint of the Incunabula papers, a warning is left, signed by a survivor. The portal does not open. It is you who become hollow, and the world flows through you. If this story disturbed you, intrigued you, or simply made your certainties wobble, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and sharing this whisper with others. Because sometimes, it's not the screams we hear the loudest, but the silences. Every week, more of you lend an ear to these stories history prefers to forget. And if you're still here, maybe something is calling you too. So keep your eyes open, tune your ear, and remember, some places don't disappear. They go quiet and wait for the last whisper. See you very soon for another plunge into the stories of the last whisper.